Howdy y'all, and hello all. Welcome back to OState All Day. I just wanted to hit at a couple things while my basketball video is being reviewed and uploaded as we speak in regards to basketball, but I also wanted to touch a little bit on some football stuff as we're in preparation mode for the Revenge Tour, aka trip to Waco to play Baylor. One of those being, I recently had the opportunity to go back and watch the Boynton interview as well as some of the basketball players' interviews as well. I wanted to make one quick correction. Yesterday I referred to the four-star freshman that stayed committed to us through the entirety of last season, even given the NCAA ban for the postseason. I mispronounced his name. I said his name was Quan Williams. Not true. Listen to Boynton, sound it out. It's actually Keon. That's the enunciation. Even though it's spelled Q-U-I-O-N, the pronounced name is actually Keon. So I wanted to cover that real quick. And then I wanted to jump into not only the way that Boynton conducted the interview, he seemed to carry himself almost like the way that you see Gundy kind of carrying himself lately, because anybody that has been watching for quite some time, Oklahoma State in general, can attest to the fact that this is a different Gundy. The 2020 COVID season had some things going on, obviously, when it came to playing the game, the scheduling conflicts, the fact that some conferences wanted to rock and roll and some conferences wanted to wait. So there was a lot of things going on outside the program that ended up causing some difficulties, right? So if you take that and you compare it to how he is now and even last season, there's a different confidence, there's a different swagger about him. He used to be very, very hush-hush. He used it as, I think, slightly a psychological game for the opponent for the coming week. Was he didn't really talk about injuries. He doesn't really touch on injuries a lot anymore, but he is far more open about what players are going through, what they need to do when it comes to their bodies and preparation-wise. So the openness we've seen from Gundy is something different. It's like he's rejuvenated for this season because of the things that kind of took place in the COVID year. Boynton has the same type of disposition at the moment. So I definitely think he's very confident in the season, which he needs to be, because we do return a lot of talent, which again, his biggest recruiting get other than Keon Williams was the ability to retain who he did. This team is going to have a lot of leadership, and it's going to have a lot of different nuances that we haven't seen that have been the missing piece. When you look at what Boynton is looking for in a point guard, your brain should automatically go Doug Gottlieb. Doug Gottlieb wasn't the greatest shooter of all time, and he would tell you the same himself, but what he did do is facilitate better than anyone we've had for a while. We need that. We needed that last season. Now, granted, last season, no matter what anybody says, had to take some sting to not be able to go to the postseason and continue to show up pumped up for every single game. The control of discipline that it appears this team has at the moment is cause for a lot of happy days. The downside is, if we have this season that we are very, very capable of having, the downside and the biggest job for Boynton is the fact that we have 9 scholarship players that are eligible to leave after this season, whether that be the NBA draft, workouts, the lower leagues, or graduation. This is going to be the season that kind of makes or breaks the trajectory of the future, in my personal opinion. It's going to take a lot for Boynton to be able to counterbalance the ban plus the scholarship limitations plus everybody that could potentially leave. So with that in mind, let's take a little bit deeper look at why this season could be so big. Bryce Thompson is clearly going to be one of the top shooters on the team. It's been established very early this season because it kind of carried over for the end of last season. Avery Anderson seems to be the obvious go-to guy to kind of take Ice Likely's place as the captain. And then Caleb Boone has been putting in work for a long time. And then he had to share some time last year with another 5-star blue chip type transfer from Memphis, Musa Cisse. This season, if those two can work together, and all signs seem to point that they are, their passing game is something that they had to coordinate between the two to expound upon. And it seems as though they've been able to do that. That 1-2 combo as playing the 4-5, because Caleb traditionally played mostly the 5 his entire career. His brother Keelan played a lot of the 4. Well, with having Musa Cisse and Caleb Boone, with that amount of talent, you got to get it on the court. So I think Boynton already deserves a lot of praise, but even more so for the fact that he feels like he's got a true facilitator this year in John Michael Wright. That this transfer came in, he was averaging 18 points a game for 3 years. So regardless of what level he came from, that amount of consistency is hard to do in practice or even against air. So that seems to be a route that we know we've lacked, that we think we've picked up right now. Not to mention the fact that Boynton had a lot of praise for Caleb Asbury, another transfer as well, who is no scrub himself when it came to the points per game, right around 13. So we've got the pieces on the outside, we think, to be able to facilitate in a manner similar to Doug Gottlieb, so that way we can take advantage of not only the athleticism that we have, because Chris Harris is finally going to be able to step on the court. He was another big-time get, and Boynton even said athletically 2 years ago he was physically the most ready to rock and roll, the most ready to step on the court. But due to injuries, we ended up having to play players that weren't quite ready. I think one of those, he didn't say by name, but I think they were referencing, is Woody Newton, the transfer from Syracuse. The athleticism jumps off the charts. Not quite Markel Brown-esque, but fairly close. And that was briefly touched on by Caleb Boone and some of the players already this offseason, is he's 100% full tilt, full go, ready to go. He's in love with every part of the process. He loves the university. He obviously has a massive amount of admiration for Boynton, and he loves the cowboy way, which is another thing I wanted to get to real quick. The amount of family ties that we've been bringing back to Stillwater recently have been not only a breath of fresh air, but I think something that every OState fan would never like to trade off. Because when you do that, especially with all this NIL craziness going on right now, when you get high character guys that care more about things like the process and doing things the right way and being a positive influence in the community legitimately, it does kind of add a buffer zone for the players that you know good and daggone well probably aren't going to commit if it comes down to just finances. If this player is so fixated on having more financial capabilities at such a young age, then they may not be the best fit for us. But if you've got somebody, even better if it's a somewhat local, Okies, the recruiting for Okies lately has been absolutely phenomenal. So hats off to you guys in the recruiting department there. But even in the surrounding area, this whole concept has, I think, allowed us to continue a trajectory of success regardless of who takes over. I know there's going to be some debate on that because there hasn't been a whole lot of 100% proof that when you replace a complete package of a coach, that you immediately get one in return that can replicate the same results. But if you have the inside of every sport constructed the same way, because Holiday does the same thing in baseball. Case in point, we just recently brought back Jordy Mercer, who me and my son used to watch constantly with the Pirates. Those type of people are coming back, and they love doing so. Another example was Bedlam last year. Did y'all see Des Bryant on the sideline running up and down, hugging Gundy, picking him up? He looked like a kid in a candy shop, just like he did with this Dallas Cowboys interview the other day when he contemplated maybe getting back in. Just kidding. But he made a funny joke after that, even that ended up going a little bit viral. That type of atmosphere is something that can have a continuation of success. Like Zach Robinson, what he's been doing with the Rams is repeatable. And people kind of discounted Goff as a viable option to be a starter in the NFL. And I think this season with the Lions, with the help of Malcolm Rodriguez, he's proven, that not always is the case, that if you have something that means more than just money, it can take you to places that you didn't know that you could get to. We all, maybe not all, a large portion of us thought that maybe Gundy had reached the ceiling a couple years ago. I'm guilty myself. I'll admit it. But still, even then, you knew the prospect of somebody coming in and be able to pick up the baton immediately and continue to carry the expectation of 9-10 win seasons. Sometimes we're going to have 12 win seasons. Should we ever go below 9? No, not really, because we've built this thing that way. Just mentioned Zach Robinson. It feels like he's got to come home someday. Brandon Whedon does a lot of stuff with Oklahoma State University now, and he's been out of the game for a little bit, so that's more familiarity and helps with the NIL stuff to be able to get those type of individuals that equal what we want as Cowboys at Oklahoma State University. It's about the dude next to you. If you ever served in the military, you have family that served in the military, they'll tell you that's the exact same principles that you're taught, right? That's the reason you go through what's called red phase and basic training in the Army, when they literally break you down, because psychologically it's been proven that it takes roughly 21 days for somebody to get out of their bad habits. The same thing can be transferred into the sports world if you do it the right way. So Gundy, again, he's a different coach now. He's found a different gear, a different confidence, a different openness. He used to not be as open with, here's the information, do with it what you please. He was kind of reserved. And one of the indications to that being accurate, now we segue, was I watched some of the football interviews of some of the players in the last day or two as well, and I wanted to hit on a couple things. So Dom, which is Dominic Richardson, running back for Oklahoma State University, he looked very confident. Like, he almost had that swagger of not being cocky, but it's like he was internally holding back this massive smile that said, we're about to show the world something. We're about to show the world a little something, is the way it felt to me. And he's not just talking about himself, he's talking about the whole running back room. So he feels supremely confident that between himself and Ollie Gordon and Jay Nixon, and if DeAndre Jackson ends up coming back to suit up and play, immediately this whole room in the back would be a monster, and we could see the beginnings of it today, not only due to teams that we've already played, but also due to keeping some arrows in the case for this specific Baylor game. Is you don't want to let too many tricks out of the bag, so I'm sure we've been fairly vanilla with everything, while Baylor had to go a little bit more than they probably wanted to disclose because of the hard game they had to have with BYU. But Dom's very, very confident in this running back room, and Gundy even came out and said that it seems to be that the safeties are going to play pretty deep because they do not want us to take the top off the D. So the intermediate stuff is going to be open, but you're going to have to earn it. One way to obviously earn that is to set up play action. And how you set up play action is to have running back success in the middle. Everybody that has watched Baylor in the last couple years have heard of Siaka Ika, number 62. He's an absolute animal. He is one of those players that you have to account for at all times. Just like when we had Tyreek Hill, or Chuba Hubbard, or Tylen Wallace. You had to know where those people were 24/7, and you had to do a bracket coverage, or you had to roll to do a different type of quarters coverage just to mask what you were doing to defend against those threats. If our running back room does what it looks like their confidence says they will do, then it's going to open up the rest of the game, right? And that means the receiver core. One of the receivers that everybody kind of forgets about, honestly, is John Paul Richardson, because not only is the son of Bucky Richardson, a famous college quarterback that went to A&M, not only has he been learning since he was a kid, his confidence level is even more than confidence. He even said it himself, it's more comfortable. And they also said the same thing about Spencer Sanders. It's not necessarily an exudement of confidence, it is, but it's more the comfortability with knowing they're going to have success. So for all the grief that Spencer has caught over his Bedlam games, deservedly so, I think we're going to be able to see that course correct a little bit this weekend. I did mention John Paul Richardson, another person that has got a lot of publicity this season, again, deservedly so, is Brock Martin. There's been a lot of jokes and stuff going around about him being the dad of the group. Well, if you watched any of his recent interviews, you can see that. Like, he's extremely, if comfortable is a word to use, he's the one that just physically exudes it. He doesn't get too hyped up. Everybody else has pretty much admitted that they're going to use last year's Big 12 championship game as further motivation for the trip to Waco. He might be the only one, admittedly so, on the team that doesn't really get tied up in all that. He agrees that it could be a good thing for the people who use it as the right kind of motivation, but he's just so chill, cool, calm, collected. Nothing seems to bother him. He knows what he needs to do. He knows what he's best at. He knows where he can help at. That's a big deal. And guess what? He's an Okie. So the way this is going to bounce around the state and reach out at spiderweb of recruiting, especially with the new age Big 12 coming into play, these are all good things, because even in basketball, we brought back one of the Suttons. And if you read the court, that means something. So again, the recruiting that we're starting to put a foothold on isn't based on money. It's based on integrity, loyalty, and the just deep desire to make Oklahoma State be something that it's very capable of, right? We've been this close so many times that it seems like the corner is about to turn. And then lastly, I wanted to cover on Brock Martin's interview. He talked about Gundy's comments the other day about how we've got some people like Brock Martin and Brendan Evers that are so old school. They're the type, if you look at old film of baseball and like the Philadelphia Eagles type back in the day, if you've seen the movie about the Mark Wahlberg, Vince Papale movie, back then, legitimately speaking, you would play, and then on the sidelines, you could smoke cigarettes, cigars, drink beer, go in the locker room for halftime, chug a six-pack, smoke a cigarette. It wasn't a big deal. And then you just went back in and played. This is where the whole concept of, grab your lunch pail and let's go to war type of comparisons have come from, was that exact philosophy. Well, Gundy made a comment about how Brock Martin and Brendan Evers are that. They're the old school type that will go over the sidelines, smoke a cigarette, and then throw their helmet back on and go back into work and not skip a beat. Brock Martin was even asked, is that you? And he's like, no, absolutely not, which he's clearly not somebody that does all that. But he, at the end, kind of embraced the fact that, I guess I am that kind of old school type of dude that it's good for a program, it's good for recruiting, it's good for building, it's good for setting the example on the differentiation between NIL money and achieving something that people maybe said you couldn't do. Just like a long time ago when people said that we could maybe get a couple high-end 3-star recruits here and there, and then the map of success that we were able to put forth was taking those 2 and 3 stars and building them up. And then it got to the point that we started getting these 4 stars and we're in competition for 5 stars. And Gundy admits that some of these 5 stars that could potentially get paid millions of dollars may not be precisely what's going to fit best in our locker room. Eventually, you thought maybe that could catch up. Maybe that's a comment that could buy them in the rear when you got places like Tech, admittedly paying players the $25,000 a piece thing, all the way up to 100 players, which includes the 85 scholarship and some walk-ons. In today's NIL era, what Tech's doing is actually really awesome, right? So when you see things like that, you're like, oh man, how are we we got this, right? But then you see the people we've brought back, like R.W. McWhorter's son, Rylan McWhorter's. The fact that Trayson Wallace is still on staff, even though his brother's on at the Ravens. That whole dynamic And then you throw in J.W. Walsh on the sidelines and Greg Richmond on the sidelines and plethora of others. Casey Dunn's been here forever. Dan Hammersmith's been here forever. We don't have all of the concerns that I think a lot of colleges have. So if you were like me in the beginning or slightly concerned about it and what it could potentially do to lose players, like what happened with Jark Bernard-Converse, it no longer concerns me that much because of these types of interviews. Even Corey Black's had an interview. You could see the relaxation that he had. A lot of people are not really messing with Jamar Muhammad this year or Corey Black for the most part, which is something that I would expect Baylor to at least try to take advantage of this week, because we think that both Jamar Muhammad and Corey Black are not only sufficient, but first, second team caliber, all Big 12. They haven't had the opportunity to necessarily show it because all of the exploitation thus far has been gaps in the middle of the field. They're getting our linebacker depth in between safety depth, and they were doing a very good job. With this extra week to prepare for Baylor, I would imagine that's something that we're going to be prepared for, and I expect Mason Cobb and Xavier Benson to end up having really big games, as well as Kendall Daniels. Kendall Daniels is a big four-star Okie that originally went to Texas A&M, and then he realized that everything that he could think to accomplish at Texas A&M, he can absolutely do in Stillwater. Is a trip to the CFP a possibility? Absolutely, just like it was last year, right? We've got to see it in motion, but the comfortability that everybody is showing, including the players, including the people on the sidelines, including the starters that are embracing the idea of the second and third teamers getting darn near as much snaps as them when you combine spring, fall, everything all together, including right now. These guys love each other. They love the game of football. They love the process that it has taken to get them back on track, right? Your stories even like Braden Johnson, who's always known as a burner, a flyer, a speedster, but he's had so many knee injuries, you never knew exactly what he was capable of if he was able to step into that Z receiver that we have had a long lineage of and massive amounts of production. Well, he has. Another person that you kind of knew battled some injuries was Brock Martin, as we've already alluded to. And then you look deeper and deeper and deeper, and you find people like Trace Ford, who arguably right now may be our most productive up to this date on the D-line. I expect that to change this weekend, by the way. But he dealt with 2 ACL surgeries, one on each knee. That used to be an immediate career ender. Obviously, it's not now with the advances in surgeries, thanks to Dr. Anderson. But it feels different. I hope that this is a thing that is going to be continued in every single sport. The family way that we've constructed all of this, I think collectively is not only something to be proud of, but it's something to remember to be thankful for, because everybody knows that growing up it wasn't like this. Having a 10-win season was a funny joke to a lot of people outside of Stillwater America. Well, now our brand has grown. We have a lot of success lately. Gundy's one of the top active coaches currently in wins. And I think that's something that we can continue even after Gundy, even though it scares people. But that's because you've got the Zach Robinsons and the J.W. Walshes and the Greg Richmonds of the world. That's why this could work. For here, for now, forever. We could be something that's talked about on a national landscape on a consistent basis. Will that ever make us a blue blood? I don't think so by definition, because blue blood's like, the old school national championship type teams. But if you go off of old school, then Yale and Princeton would be blue bloods. So I think there's some room for debate there. But regardless, the future looks bright. The future looks exactly like Boone would have envisioned, I'm sure, whenever he built the stadium. I was lucky enough at that time to work for a company called United Mechanical, installing all the air conditioning when BPS was being built. And I remember that was one of my coolest jobs ever, because every day for lunch, I could take my lunch pail, and I was the only person, now you're talking hundreds and hundreds of employees in that building, I was the only person that would take a lunch pail and sit and watch all the practices, right? And I thought that was such a blessing and a privilege at the time, because not only did it teach me a lot about the game of football, I was able to take the statistical applications and make them physical on the field. So I owe a lot to just being around campus constantly. My dad was one of the top salesmen for Mid-America Wholesale Foods that sold to most of the fraternities and sororities and whatnot when I was a kid. So I got to walk around campus on a weekly basis and seeing things put up like homecoming. Our homecoming is literally arguably the best in the country, definitely one of the biggest. And the way that they do it it's a sight to behold for any college football fan. The experience in Stillwater, Oklahoma, it's something you got to try. Just like going to Galgrados, like going to the Fog, like being on Coach K Court. These things are bucket list things. And nobody could have grown up thinking that Oklahoma State University was going to be a consistent potential bucket list type of program. I think we're there. If we're not exactly there, I think we're pretty daggone close. So the future's bright, guys. This looks like it's going to be a fun season all the way around. I love Holiday bringing back Jordy Mercer. He's done that quite a few times, even with Mark Ginther. This is how you build. This is how you build something the right way without it costing you a complete arm and a leg. Are we going to have to spend to be competitive? Yes. I don't think Gundy or anybody else, Chad Weiberg or President Shrum, are saying anything other than that exactly matters. Everything we build, it matters and it means something. Even for Weiberg, whose family member was in the Remember the 10 plane crash. Basketball team left Colorado basketball game, crashed. We lost a lot of good people, and it's something that we still remember on a consistent basis in Stillwater, and I would say around the state of Oklahoma. But anyways, guys, that's all I got. If you can help me out, do a little hip thrustration action on the like, subscribe, comment, and then hit the share, I would appreciate it. I'm trying to help build the national landscape of the knowledge of Oklahoma State University. There's people like Feels Like 45 that you have to check out. Their Twitter breakdowns on some of the schematic things is going to give the average fan the ability to say, oh, okay, I understand what quarters coverage is. I understand why cover 6 works in this situation. Well, what is a cover 2? That's stuff that is good for everybody, because I think all of us would like to be the most knowledgeable fan base in the country, because the more knowledgeable you are about your history, the more credibility it allows the continuation of growth, in my personal opinion. Anyways, like I said, I love you all. God bless. Go Pokes, and be ready for the next one.